And Frasier, I think Frasier was better than Cheers because it was. Oh, we're on.
He was very annoying as a central character.
Yes, he was.
Alrighty. So, if everyone's ready.
Yes.
Yeah.
I might need to go to the bathroom in like 10, 15 minutes, but yeah, I'm ready enough, I guess.
Okay.
So don't start with you.
So, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are continuing our supernatural August here, I believe. And welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, David Streggy, but I am turning this over to Brandon for the evening's festivities. So, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about the movie that we are going to be discussing tonight?
Well, tonight we're going to be covering the 1979 film Phantasm, directed by Don Coscarelli. Is
Don
that right?
Coscarelli.
Yeah, see, I got it. And also written by Don Coscarelli. So we're in for a treat. Not too long ago, they released a big set with a shiny new Phantasm movie. And we'll start, I guess, with those first impressions. So, Dustin, did you want to try and lead us off so you could run out?
Oh, well, so I had never heard of Phantasm until I think 2015, something like that. It's kind of amazing because this is a lot of people's favorite horror movie, and it has such a huge, enormous cult following, and it had just completely missed me. It was... mute your thing, damn it. It had completely missed me, and so I watched it with my friend Andrew, who we've had on before. I think for the very first time, I think winter 2018, 2017. And there's kind of nothing else really like it. Like, it's a hard movie to describe. Like, I've seen it 10 times. I said on Twitter earlier, I've seen it 10 times, and I'm still not really sure what's happening. It's more like a nightmare experience kind of thing. So my impressions of it are, of course, pretty good. Like, it's an awesome movie with really cool effects and a very memorable villain and a unique premise, assuming you can really define its premise in linear terms. And, I just have kind of overwhelmingly positive things to say about it.
So, well, let's go to Jake. Is this your first time viewing Phantasm?
Yes, it is. I had not seen this one before. This was the one that I think I knew by name, but since I'm not quite as in the horror scene as y'all are, I guess the reputation was a little less there, but I knew of it. But I had not seen it, and in all honesty, my first impression is that it did not leave much of an impression. I found it mostly interesting. It had some good moments. There was some definite visual flair, and I enjoyed the music a lot. But the main... I mean, the tall man left a little bit of an impression, but...
How could he not?
Yeah, but not as much as people make him out to, though. And the little Jawa-looking dwarves definitely. But other than that, it was. I'm kind of neutral to it.
Well, Dave, how about you? Is this your first time?
This is definitely not my first time. I had actually first heard of the film from my fiance about maybe 10 years ago, and we ended up trying to search and find them for ourselves. And then we ended up having a marathon of it like 8 years ago. And I've seen it a couple of times since. Maybe like one more time, but this was my third time seeing it. And as this very first one leaves a lot to the imagination, but if you're seeing it for the first time, that ball, that ball, and then that tall guy saying "boy," that's very impressive.
I was thinking about that all day. Boy!
Yeah. It didn't really have I mean, looking back at it, he didn't really have much dialogue, to be honest, in the very first film. But it left an impression on me, and I wanted to see more for some reason. I know I know what I just heard from you, Jake, but at the time, the actors were unknown actors, I think, and I believe that it left. I mean, there were definitely some things to like about the film the first time and the second time, enough for me to watch it a third time. So I was fairly impressed with it the first time, because to me, the idea of all these bodies in this morgue, setting, being sent off to another world. I mean, come on.
It's a pretty unique idea.
What the fuck is going on here? Is he an alien or something?
Oh yeah.
You never really figure that out.
It's not very clear. The short answer is they've said yes.
Yeah.
But he seems more of a ghost than some of the other ones. Like, I think the point is that you're not really supposed to know, and it's supposed to be unclear, which they managed to pull off pretty well.
They want more questions than answers with this.
Exactly.
And speaking of, this is definitely not my first time when I watched this. I had mixed it up with another series, which a video game called Phantasmagoria, which is a slightly different series. And but so I got it when it got its re-release on DVD. Gosh, it's been a number of years now. I know before I was married, probably as long as a decade ago.
Well,
and I mean, I don't even know when it got its re-release on DVD.
How about this one, Brandon? How do you feel about it being as old as you are?
Yeah, well, it did come out on the year of my birth, which was I did not see it when I was born, but I will assume my parents didn't either, because they weren't really all that big on that type of horror, though my father might have. The first impression of it was a lot like Jacob's, which was I didn't really have an impression of it. It kind of flew through my head. I mean, there were a couple of things like the tall man, with that eerie crypt, and the silver ball that basically screwed you up quite a bit. It was a nasty, nasty weapon. And
I'll admit that is a cool-looking crypt.
I didn't really come back to it until I saw that movie 3 and 4. The other movies basically were released on DVD, yet for some reason they never would release the second one. And then finally, when they did release the second one, which was years after they had re-released the first one and the others, I finally sat down and I rewatched it with all the rest. And I enjoyed it more in the context with the other movies. Because to me, this is a movie series where the sequels build upon the original lore of the first one and actually improve upon that. Especially because they have a really cool shotgun in the second one.
Yeah, I'm the most heavily armed ice cream man of all time.
Yeah. Now, looking at this, I'm realizing that this is not my first impression with this director. I hadn't realized it's the same guy that directed Bubba Hotep. Now, that's something that had an unusual premise.
That's kind of his thing, in case you couldn't tell.
Well,
Yeah, it
considering
looked
it's
like.
I mean, the premise
before
and the plot line. Actually, it's a good actually an opportunity to go ahead and talk about the plot really quick. The plain
I just
and
want
the
to.
simple. Oh, there you go.
And of course, ladies and gentlemen, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to put the spot out there before I lost it. It's like a lot of the weapons that we see throughout the series, I feel like they made it into like the Turok games for N64. Because like quad barrel shotguns and this thing called the cerebral bore, which we will talk about when we get to that moment. But if you've played the game and seen the movie, I think you know what I mean.
Well, essentially, the plot of this is you have this this group of friends that get together for the funeral of their other friend who had been killed off after trying to have sex in the cemetery.
Not a good idea.
And this mysterious thing happened to where this guy was seen absconding with the body. So this guy's little brother decides he's going to investigate and uncovers this evil conspiracy where they have been taking the bodies, reanimating them, and using the dead reanimated bodies as slaves on another planet. And of course, this is all curated by the Tall Man. So they must band together to stop this ghoulish trade from becoming, well, it's not really widespread, but from continuing on, as it has for apparently many, many, many years. And I think that's pretty much the short of it. Makes it sound much simpler if you put it that way. So, looking at that with the just adding in the characters with the plot, we're introduced to, of course, our main trio. Well, the first of the trio very shortly before he dies. Where you have the debatably the main character, one of the two brothers, and our friendly ice cream man. Were there any impressions that you all had of this trio?
Well, I think that the young kid is a growing kid who ends up ultimately being the main character almost, besides his brother. Even though I think the Tall Man is like very menacing and kind of throughout. In the very beginning, the young kid, he is always following his brother. He's very mechanical in the sense of working on that car, per se. I mean, for a young kid his age, I don't remember seeing a lot of teenagers his age in films working on cars, except for Christine. You know, so.
Well, there's an actual reason for that, though. I mean, they ended up losing their father throughout the whole, and mother. That just and that tends to leave people with well, what do they call it? Drive to do something.
Okay. Well, I know that in the very beginning, the kid, which let's see, what was his name? Does anybody
Michael.
remember?
I think it was Mike. Mike.
Mike. Well, Mike is definitely trying to fit in with his family. I think his mom and dad had died.
Yeah, he's being raised by his brother, but his brother has been talking about shipping him off to live with the aunt, so he's been following his brother constantly, which is how we end up at the funeral at the beginning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're pretty much left on their own, and somehow they are somewhere near this funeral home that just so happens to start having dead bodies disappear. But you know, the reason why I say that Mike is a growing child is he is, as we see, a peeping Tom to his brother's infidelity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Infidelity? What?
Yep.
So, oddly enough, he catches though it was Mike at the end, really, that catches not the very first glimpse of the tall man. That was really in the crypt itself when the big brother actually runs into him. He says, pretty much, "Don't you have a funeral to get to?" But but he was the first one that notices something might be slightly off about this when the guy lifts up the coffin of the friend, well, by himself.
But only slightly.
Just slightly. I mean, nothing off about that. Everybody can do that.
Yeah, you just gotta eat your Wheaties.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he ain't called the tall man for nothing. What were y'all's first impressions of the tall man in those early scenes?
He was pretty creepy. Like, even though he didn't really do anything until later, like one of the first times we see him is at their friend's funeral. Like, it takes like 5 guys to carry the casket, and we see the tall man just like pick it up under his arm and like put it in the car. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but not only do we see him, we hear him, because you hear his footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
You hear his footsteps, and that's what's even more creepier, because all of a sudden you hear, you know, and then all of a sudden you see him pick up that coffin after you hear the footsteps. It's like his footsteps are clomping down a hallway, and yet the hallway isn't there, and he's going in slow motion.
And of course, after spying this, it's almost as if he has been found out immediately, because he has nightmares about that, which necessitates him to decide, I'm going to come back at night because that seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Not always the
movie,
wisest.
Always a good idea.
Oh, people have good ideas all the time in horror movies. They just don't use them.
Right.
But with that, we get to see the tall man again in more of a confrontational role, as well as, I believe, a first impression of that lovely little toy that they had.
Well, Reggie, the character that Reggie Bannister plays, reminds me a lot of like the humorous part of the two, because he comes in with his ice cream and his singing and his guitar, and they have a nice little jam session there, which I kind of like that little jam session, because that's what true jamming is, you know. One person is saying something and another person chimes in, and they have fun, you know. So me being a musician in my past, or a striving musician myself at one point in time, I can have love of that particular scene.
I mean, I think it's also a good leftover of the '70s, really. If you think about it, that sort of that musical edition, because you see that a lot in the mid '70s, early '80s films with slight musical interludes still there, sort of an old hanger-on of old days.
What do you think of Reggie, Dustin?
I mean, just Reggie in general, or
As a character?
Well, I'm trying to kind of divorce Reggie in the first Phantasm from as we come to know him in the rest of the series, because he becomes kind of an action hero in the rest of the series. Here he's more of a supporting character. Like, he doesn't necessarily do all that much. I mean, he does get owned by the tall man later in the movie during their big confrontation. But Reggie's just kind of a guy who gets sucked into this. I think, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like, I believe this dude. It's like, yeah, he's got some cool interests. Like when he has that jam session.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he's got like the ice cream truck, and I think that makes him I think that's one of the things that makes his character so memorable. It's like you just associate, this unassuming guy with like all the stuff we see him do later. So I think he's kind of underexposed in the first Phantasm.
And I think he looks very young in here, doesn't he?
Well, he's like balding still, though.
Yeah,
he looks young for a bald guy.
He's got a very young face in here.
I mean, there's some people that go bald in their early 20s, so it's very possible.
Yeah,
that he could have been in his mid 20s.
Well, that was still like really hard without thinking about like Phantasm 3 and 4. When he's got like the quad shotgun and just like blasting spheres.
Like, he's more like Rambo.
Kind of, yeah.
You really want the quad
That's what they do with him.
Of course, you have a lot of the female characters that have been involved as well, such as the seductress character, and of course you have the just a lot of these characters that show up just for smaller bits but play their parts, like her, the fortune teller and her daughter, or granddaughter really, and the girlfriend.
Speaking of the fortune teller, that whole setting where she had him put his hand inside that thing, that was so totally Frank Herbert's doing.
Yeah, I was thinking that myself.
I was thinking to myself, say hello to the Atreides Gam Jabbar. Fear, you must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. And then she said something similar, and I was like, what the fuck? This is ripping off Dune.
Dune.
He's got to be careful that Schrodinger might be in that box.
It's like that Gravity Falls joke with the pain hole. When they were trying to explain that it's just like a hole with pain, and they were trying to explain to like the producers, it's like, well, what's in the hole? No, it's just pain. Yeah, but what causes the pain? No, it's literally pain.
Well, it just so totally reminded me of the very first beginning of both the Dune film and the miniseries Dune, because it just totally kind of imitated it. It's nothing against the director or anything like that. Maybe he was influenced by Dune because it was in the novel as well.
I mean, it's Don Coscarelli, like one of the best people that's ever directed horror. So yeah, it's gonna be great.
Now, I was confused about one part about this, and those of you who are experts could probably help me with that. Now, the woman who seduces them, is she actually the tall man in disguise? Because
Yes.
it's like, which is shows some more weird powers that the tall man has.
That is the tall man in disguise. Yeah.
That's a really good disguise.
Was
So yeah,
Pretty
that was
fucked up.
impressive.
Yeah.
was the daughter the same girl that his brother was necking with?
No.
You what?
It's
What was the fortune teller's daughter the same person the brother was necking with?
Shouldn't be, because she was
I
much
don't-
younger. She was about the age of Mike.
Okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't entirely sure because if that
the
was the
doctor
case,
must have been, but we don't know because we didn't see her.
If that was the case, then he'd be a pedophile at this point.
You.
uh, but actually,
House
we
of
also
Jeff Steen.
saw they did do an alluding to the transformative powers of the tall man when Mike breaks into the basement upon having these bad dreams and ends up cutting off a couple of the at least one of the tall man's fingers, keeping it in a box and watching, and then seeing it transforms into something entirely different.
It transforms into this razor-toothed fly. Like, and the finger moves the entire time too. It's like, even though, so the tall man is right behind him. He slams the door and chops off a bunch of the tall man's fingers because the tall man's hand gets stuck in the door, and this like viscous yellow ooze like shoots out instead of blood, and the fingers are moving like independently on the ground. He picks one up and he takes it back as proof. After he shows it to his brother, then it turns into this like fly monster, and they have to deal with that. Like, I think they end up putting it down the garbage disposal. But while it's attacking them, Reggie sees it too. So hey, now they've got somebody else involved.
That was
Mhm.
that was the way of them convincing, Mike convincing them that there was something slightly off by the funeral home.
Reggie's just like, hey guys, what's going on? Ah, killer fly.
Yeah,
One of the things that Reggie reminded me of was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I don't know why, but I keep thinking about them with the ice cream truck.
oh
It's really hard not to think of that.
no, it isn't.
So we've covered most of the main characters there, except for, of course, the girlfriend, and we can't leave out the reanimated corpses that look more like hooded, more like Jawas from Star Wars, with the little hoods on.
Yeah, I think that was like a problem they were talking about like in production. It's like, I think originally they were supposed to look slightly more like Jawas, and they were like, ah, crap, tone it down. And I guess it wasn't enough. I seem to remember somebody telling a story along those lines in one of the extras.
stealing our idea before we had it.
Well, this would have come out after Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know they were. I saw that too. That they were in production, and Star Wars came out, and they were like, "Oh, that seems to happen."
The only other movie that I could think of that these hooded creatures could have been was Spaceballs, but Spaceballs imitated Star
Ding,
Wars.
ding.
Ding ding.
Yes.
Damn it, now I'm doing it.
I always loved how the military march from Bridge on the River Clyde for that particular scene.
I thought it was like a Wizard of Oz thing. I don't know.
And
But
There, of course, the corpses shrunk down, and that's another thing that I had. It had been so long since I had seen this one and the others that I had not realized that they had not covered it. How the process worked in this one, other than they were putting them in these barrels to transport over to the planet. Whereas
Yeah.
in the sequels, they actually show them taking a body and shrinking it down to that size in order to deal with the atmosphere. What was it? The gravity on that planet they're being sent to toil at.
So
Yeah.
so they really don't really explain a lot in this first installment, do they?
No. They do show that it's been going on for a very, very long time. And
Yeah,
they show like an old picture of them, and you can see the tall man in the picture.
Right.
I think it's in one of the sequels. We get the line. It's like, you think when you die, you go to heaven? You go to us. And it's like,
Yes.
Well,
I kind of like that scene with the old picture. That was one neat little trick that I enjoyed. He's this guy in this old picture on a horse and buggy, and he's like, "Oh man, that's the same guy." And then the guy just looks at him, and he's like, kind of this evil little grin. Yeah, so that was kind of fun.
Do you think it was more effective with them having them actually go out and kill fresh, so they could have fresh corpses, other than just having them just rob the graves of people that were freshly killed, since he was already set up at the funeral home?
Well, I believe that the reason why the tall man was going after these three is because that they somehow caught on to what they were doing. You know,
Well,
That's not.
what
But they
they were doing
were.
was going out killing people.
Yeah, I was
and
gonna say the opening showed that they were not just dealing with the people who were regularly dying; they were killing people on the regular to add to the numbers.
Well, it seems to be a regular thing in movies that for some reason people are just too inconsiderate and they just don't die enough for funeral homes to stay busy. You know, it's like like Get Low was all about that too. Just like yeah.
we're not having enough business. Let's kill a few cadavers and add them to the fray. Hey,
But after they managed to figure out as the plot goes on, they managed to figure out the portal to the dimension and take it out, which was a very interesting way that they did that aesthetically. But we'll talk more about that in all of the just set design and special effects. But they do decide, well, they've still got the tall man, so they finally have to figure out, how do we deal with the tall man? Setting up a plan to have him buried alive.
alive.
So, to me, it was kind of weird seeing the movie keep going from the point where they destroyed the portal to the other place. But how'd y'all feel about that last part?
About the big reveal in the last 10 minutes.
Well, as far as the
The
them
fact that it
confronting
was
the tall man and trying to kill him.
the fact that it was all a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of
That's our
the
big-
ending got really confusing.
Yeah, that's what makes this movie so strange, because it seems to kind of jump around for a little bit, and then it like forms a linear thing. It's like, okay, we gotta deal with the tall man. And it's like, yeah, we got him. And it's like, wait, did any of that actually happen?
Fooled you.
And according to
Which
Reggie,
would have worked.
according to Reggie, at the very end, his brother died in a car accident. So,
Well, it would have worked out pretty well if they hadn't done sequels to it. Which kind of puts the foil in that. Because they're sequels, that makes the ending even more confusing at the end of the day.
so could we technically just scrap this film and start at 2? Technically,
No. What are you talking about? The ending of this like goes right into 2. I mean, I think that part ends up being a dream too. I don't know. It becomes very messy very quickly.
You could theoretically cut off the very last bit and just end it after the death of the tall man, where he's basically being taken care of by Reggie, and that could go directly into 2, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The other weird part where, oh no, it was all a dream. None of that happened. That maybe not. But that was just a weird add-on. It almost made me feel like they weren't planning on doing a sequel at that time, and just decided they wanted to screw with you ending.
Also, another thing I wonder is that I didn't actually watch the deleted scenes. I don't know if I ever revisit this or add it to the collection. I might have to give that a look. But it's my understanding that the original cut of the film was 3.5 hours, and that Coscarelli cut it down considerably on his own because he thought it was too long. And it could be that during the editing process, he had more that made sense that got thrown away. It's possible.
Hours. Good
Yeah.
God.
Apparently, they kept a lot of the deleted scenes, but he actually deleted a lot of scenes. And from what I understand, you cannot find them anymore. So who knows? Maybe those were the scenes that explain the ending.
I wonder if that's why we get a new release of this movie seemingly every year. It's because it's like, oh yeah, I found another reel. And it's like, is it?
It could be.
So, does anybody want to talk about the plot or characters? Anything more for that they want before we move on?
We covered how cool the tall man is, right? So that's really that was my takeaway.
He was tall.
Well,
It's creepy.
Actually, it is worth mentioning. I think Angus Scrimm was like 6'4" or something.
well,
And I think they had him read like I think they had him wearing like 3-inch platforms.
and here's the thing: in real life, he actually did something where he was actually on the board of the billboard with music, where he actually decided or helped out with the process of putting like some of the Beatles number ones up on the spot where they were when the Beatles were around. So that's what I learned in an interview that I had with a director that he knew, and he was telling me about it a little bit because we got Reggie Bannister in his film. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of his what he did in his real life, where who knew. So other than that, I think we can move on. What about everyone else?
Yeah, I think we.
Yeah, I think so. So
Maybe
let's go to special effects. I believe that would be our next rundown because we have a whole bunch of special effects and items, a lot of cool things, and one particular killing tool that then was formatted into the shape of a Blu-ray set that never came to this country, unfortunately.
Well, it's coming to this country in a couple of months.
Yeah, well, it's sad that I missed out on that one. I just got that cheapo Best Buy set. But as far as that is one of the cooler items, which the series comes to be known for cool items and weapons as they go. But that particular ball, I think, is one of the things that represents it more than anything.
So what we're talking about is it's called a Sentinel Sphere. And it's like this hovering silver sphere with just all kinds. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife kind of just like pointy things that like pop out of it. And its big thing is it has like a drill. So like it flies into somebody's face and puts a drill like in their head and just like sucks their brains out. And the first time I saw it, it's like, what? Glorious.
That's why, as you said, that was the one you were talking about with the Turrican game.
And
what the cerebral bore, which is basically a Sentinel Sphere.
And what do you think about the design of this original Sentinel Sphere?
Like, it's so iconic because it's so simplistic. Oh, sorry, Jake. You go.
Oh, I was saying it was pretty cool. But
Uh, I
although
think
one
that they
thing, I'm
actually.
sure
Oh,
you
sorry. Go
guys
ahead.
came across this. I'm sure y'all saw this in your reading. I found it kind of sad, and I know in the interview I saw with Coscarelli, he expressed that it was kind of sad that the guy who designed that set piece died right before the film was released, and so it was
Aw.
like he was like it kind of expressed some sadness that he never got to see the finished product. But yeah, it is kind of a Swiss Army ball, isn't it?
What's odd is if you look at it and you think about present. Of course, several of these things have been carried over to present day. I keep thinking about the Stephen King book, which was the Dark Tower book 5. I cannot remember the book's name. It's so weird. I can think of the sixth book name, but I can't think of the. It was like the Wolves or something. Wolves of the
The
Kala.
Wolves of Kaya. Yeah.
Hell,
Hi. And they, of course, part of it was the wolves used these little balls like snitches from Harry Potter, which would seek in on the opponent's head and blow their head off. But I also thought maybe there was sort of a combination between the Harry Potter snitches and these silver balls and inspiration. It would not surprise me. I mean, they were basically a bunch of doom bots uh, going around using Harry Potter snitches to kill people and lightsabers.
Yes, I love the cheek of Stephen King and that whole thing. All those, like, who else but Stephen King could get away with that kind of stuff?
That is true. He's probably the only one.
He sneeches. It wasn't there sort of a rolling reference in, like, they turned it over and saw printed on the back who produced them? I can't remember
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, they referenced Harry Potter there, and I
Yeah.
thought that was funny. But I guess with Stephen King, at that point, all he had to do was go to the authors and of these things and say, "Hey, I like your idea. Can I use it in my book?" Sure.
Yeah.
Might as well. You're the king.
Yep.
But I thought to myself, things like that had to gain some inspiration, I think, from the ball, especially when you're looking at something like Harry Potter with the snitches, or even with any of the
Just any flying spheres.
the flying spheres.
Maybe.
And I'll admit this one did have some good. It had some memorable visuals, and the ball was one. Like I said earlier, the mausoleum, the crypt, actually was pretty memorable. That it was very distinctive look. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Kubrick, which that probably wasn't accidental.
A lot
And
of
then,
white.
yeah, was it?
A lot of white being used.
Oh yeah, definitely a lot of white.
Yeah, you guys know how I feel about Kubrick, so.
Why we had to mention him.
This is the undercover Kubrick film that you realize you liked at the end of the day.
Oh, nah, I think Don Coscarelli's better.
Actually,
Or at least
this
his films are consistently more interesting.
this did come out the year before The Shining, so it kind of makes you wonder if Kubrick borrowed from this one.
Maybe.
Who knows?
You never
Actually, he
know.
may have watched it. You never know what Kubrick would do.
True.
I don't know, drugs.
Ugh.
Burn, insult master.
But there were also
speaking of references, the actual title of the film, Coscarelli has gone on record and pretty much saying that it was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. And being a Poe fan, I approve. But I liked in the interview I saw with him and the tall man. They did this interview that was on the set I borrowed, and they asked him like, where did the title Phantasm come from? And he starts off. I think what he started off was something like, it's a word in the dictionary. I'm like,
Well, we know.
but then he followed that up with, well, it was one that Poe used a lot, and no one else really seems to. And then he kind of defined it and whatever. But he's right that Poe really liked the word, but you don't see it used a lot. And so it was kind of cool that he made that nod there, So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I agree. And I think one other thing that I wanted to mention is I liked how Reggie, when he came to the portal between the worlds, he thought of his tuning fork when he put his hands
Yeah.
on top of the thing.
The idea of using the vibrations as the way for teleportation to the other world was kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a really sweet concept, and that effect works so well too. Like I think they did that somehow with mirrors or something like that. I think I wish I remembered because it was like a really interesting like effects breakdown
The effect of going into the other
of
world.
like entering the portal and seeming to just disappear into it, like and having it set like in the middle of the room. Like
honestly,
so good.
That was one of the ones where I felt like I saw what they were doing. Like usually, I know you in particular like to talk about when the effects kind of fail. Uh, to you know, uh, I was like, okay, they're dragging him behind something. Okay, yeah, whatever. It's impressive for the time. Yeah, but I was not really terribly impressed with that particular effect. But yeah.
No, I thought it really fit with the surreal quality of the movie. Like
Yeah.
I bought it, like in this universe, it's like, wow, that's weird. Okay. And I guess I didn't really glare too hard, like looking for imperfections, but I thought it was one of the cooler effects.
I had already stopped doing that, and that's one thing. Like as far as the production aspects, I definitely was kind of already having that reaction to the acting. So it was kind of like it. If you look at it as they might have been going for heightened melodrama emotions, if that's what they were going for, they nailed it. But as one that really likes realism in acting, even in horror, that was one thing that took me out of the movie slightly because they were so melodramatic and over the top in many cases.
What about the effects where you got to deal with the tall man and the cutting off the limbs with the creepy thing that it became and the scene that it was involved in? That really seems to be the only real gore effects you got to see throughout this.
I mean, there were a few things here and there, like the tall man stabs Reggie. That was a fairly simple effect. Actually, quite a few stabbings, yeah.
I was gonna say the most complex was that thing with the fingers and the and the puppet.
Yeah, there were a couple shots of the puppet of the fly puppet where it did look kind of phony, but thankfully it was pretty brief. Like you only saw it's like, oh, that looks kind of, oh, okay, it's all gone already. All right, fine.
That was a big fly.
It was a damn big fly, yeah. And what about? I think we probably have to mention our dwarf creatures. Like, we didn't really. We only got to see one with under its cloak this time.
Just a little bit, which was kind of disappointing because, I mean, it really left a lot to the imagination of, it's almost like you didn't really get a whole lot of what the director meant to go on. I mean, it's like this film was unfinished.
If only we had those extra 2 hours of footage.
Right.
My goodness.
I might not have
So-
attempted it if it was 3.5 hours.
So looking at the actual, if we're moving from this to the music itself, I'm not really big on the music myself, but several of you are big on these type of soundtracks. So what did you all think of the music?
Well, this has some of the most memorable horror movie music
Yeah.
anywhere, really. I mean, like the main theme, like that. It's hard to describe, too. It's like a low, mellow kind of thing. Like, it's very creepy and atmospheric, and it really sets like this otherworldly tone. Like, I think this has awesome music, and I'm kind of surprised anybody would think otherwise.
I think it was excellent. It did, like you said, it helped. Most of the scenes that were effective for me, the music might have helped a little bit or a lot. And I agree with what Dave said earlier about that jam session. That was a cool little musical interlude. I enjoyed that a lot. And yeah, so overall, the use of music was pretty impressive, I thought.
I liked the music behind this. In fact, that YouTube link that I sent you guys earlier, I like that little dubstep.
Yeah, we found. Oh, it's called Synthwave. There's like a retro synthwave cover of the theme song, which I was listening to kind of a lot today. So I really enjoyed that. Like, again, this movie has such an awesome theme. I'm kind of surprised I haven't seen the soundtrack out on vinyl somewhere yet.
Well, I know there was a limited numbered soundtrack to it that was on his site for a while, but it's sold out. And I think there was a vinyl for it too, and that is sold out as well. So,
maybe we'll look for it. I think the only piece of Phantasm merch I have is when I bought all that stuff from that kind of unofficial horror museum that was shutting down. I got a tall man figure signed by Angus Scrimm, and that's up there on my wall.
Especially since I think he's no longer with us.
Yeah, he passed away a couple of years ago.
That's one thing. If I ever had, of course, my wife wouldn't do it because she's had a lot. I'm not going to go into details, but she had a bad association with this movie, so I have to be careful about mentioning it when she's able to hear.
That's weird.
But like I say, there's more to it, but I'm not going to say that sort of thing on the air. But as far as things go, there are a couple of things. Like, I'd love to be able to get a replica of that quad shotgun. Of course, again, we keep going back to the sequels to this film. We'll have to come back to this in the future to do one of the sequels at least.
This has some pretty crazy sequels. So, I mean, it's hard not to think of Phantasm without thinking of the entire franchise. I mean, I still haven't seen the fifth one, Ravager, which some people have said is a good thing, but, you know, I'll try it. Although, I'm not sure, like, I think I'm going to just get it separately, because I know that we have yet another reissue of the Blu-ray set. That company put out another Blu-ray set a couple years ago, and that sold out. And then they released 3 and 4 on their own individual, like, Blu-ray title. Yeah, Blu-rays. And I bought those, so I have... My Phantasm copy is the Steelbook from Best Buy. And then for part 2, I have the Shout Factory release. And then for parts 3 and 4, I have the Well Go, like, individual Blu-ray releases. Which, from what I understand, actually don't have all the special features they did on that set. And so then, I don't know what's on the normal release of Ravager, but supposedly if the new reissue set, we're getting some more extras on Ravager. So
Yeah.
the company is called Wellgo USA. It's like, what are they
Yeah.
doing?
See,
Well, Welgo is known for releasing some odd stuff and a lot of foreign pictures, so it is an interesting studio. But as
Well,
far
they're
as the
releasing.
releases,
what I did is
yeah.
I have the original Anchor Bay DVDs, and when Wellgo came out with that 5 DVD set, it included the remaster of Phantasm on DVD. So I went and got that set on top of the Anchor Bay just to see if they had any extras that the others did not.
Well, people were making jokes about how the collector editions were going to escalate until we got the life-size replica dwarf creature edition.
Does anybody actually know why it was that? And this is something that this is the one thing I associate the most with Phantasm. If I was not a collector, I probably would have forgotten Phantasm altogether. But as a collector, I associated it with the trouble it put me through trying to get the second film on physical release, which nowadays it's not hard. But back when I was trying to collect, it was near impossible to get a physical release of the second film. Does anybody know why that it was caused?
I think there was something, from what I understand, there was something to the effect of, like, it got heavily edited or cut or something, and I guess they might have, like, lost stuff, or there might not have been prints of it. The big deal that people were making about the new Well Go set is supposedly it's going to have Phantasm 2 uncut for, like, the first time, which I don't know how accurate that really is, because the more you dig into Phantasm, the weirder it gets. The more it's like, wait, what happened to that?
Well, after this discussion, I want to see Phantasm 1 uncut for the first time.
I think that's going to be like seeing The Wicker Man uncut. It's like, if you can find the secret vault that the footage was tossed in, otherwise, out of luck.
Brandon and I have kind of a running joke about the Peter Jackson cut of movies. And I could almost see Peter Jackson being the one to dig up those lost ones. He probably loves this movie. I would.
Well, let's move on to the last section here, which is favorite scenes. Why don't we start with Dave, since we ended with you on the initial part. So what was your favorite scene, Dave?
Oh God, I think two of my favorite scenes, like one is one I already mentioned, which is that guitar jam, and then the second part is when when Reggie gets stabbed, that female all of a sudden we realize the female is the tall man, and I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, you've got the two playing on each other, and evidently he can become anything that he wants, evidently, just to kill.
Yeah,
so
the tall man has so many weird, like, eldritch powers. You don't really know what all he's capable of.
True enough. So, Dustin, how about you? What was your favorite scene?
Well, I think my favorite scene, is a bit of a cliched favorite scene, but when we get our first really good glimpse of the tall man, Mike sees him walking out in the daylight, like, out in public, and he, like, walks in front of, like, a bunch of mist from Reggie's, like, ice cream truck, and he just, like, glares at Mike through the mist, and he, like, kind of takes the mist in a little bit, and it's like, what in the hell? It's like, it feels like you're imagining seeing this, but we know he's actually there, or is he? Like, it's a really good, like, movie villain introduction, and it sticks out in my mind. It's like, I don't remember when it had been about a year or two since I last saw this, and I didn't remember a whole lot of the other scenes except for the ending, boy. And this, and so I really like that image of the tall man, and a lot of people that are really into Phantasm, like, that's their favorite scene too. So I think I'm gonna go with that.
I think
How about you? I'm sorry.
I just thought of one more since he said a boy. I think my favorite line. I know I said favorite scene, but my favorite line is when he says "boy," and then right afterwards he's like, "You played a very good game, boy, but now you're going to die." Or
You play a good game, boy, but now the game is over. You can quote a lot of this movie.
So, Jacob, what was your favorite scene in the film?
It's kind of hard to say. I think probably the one that Dustin cited, I agree that was a fairly effective scene with him walking by. And a couple of the scenes with the tall man in general were kind of memorable and interesting. Reggie had some good moments, There was, like I said, that jam session and him, remembering the tuning fork, that one part. It's really hard for me to say anything in particular that was a clear favorite. Yeah, it's kind of hard to. I mean, I kind of like the scene with the fortune teller and her granddaughter, just because they were so weird. And it was it was interesting. Of course, I had the problem that both of the brothers annoyed me. The younger brother annoyed me because he was a clear stalker for his older brother, which is just creepy. And the older brother just annoyed me on multiple levels. So, yeah, any scene with either of them, I had trouble picking as my favorite. So, I don't know. Like I said, the movie overall was good, but nothing really head and shoulders above the rest.
Oh, I did have. Well, my favorite scene was the first scene where he was introduced in the crypt, where he snuck in there, and of course you had that one person's kind of henchman for the that was working there that got hit by the ball for the first time, and something about that. It just was a very messy scene, but it just the setting and everything together just came together to add to that feeling of horror. And it was one of the few scenes that I have a clear memory of, no matter what in the film. And I feel that stands for something, definitely.
That is a really fun moment where the guy's like, "What are you doing in here? Huh?" Wham! He basically just like turns the corner and he's just like, "Pow!" Dead. With that though, I think I gotta go take care of something. So I'm gonna just real quick do my wrap up if you guys don't mind.
Yep, that's where we're heading to anyway. So go ahead and lead us off.
Well, I'm Dustin, also known as the Crypt of Horrors. I have a horror collector here in Milwaukee. I have a channel for my collection, the Crypt of Horrors, here on YouTube. I also have an Instagram under the Crypt of Horrors for the collection, and I hang out on Twitter as, you guessed it, the Crypt of Horrors. So follow me, and we'll have an adventure. I love showing off my pickups. Recently, I found some really great stuff from Dollar Tree, and I'll tell you guys about it in a future video. So, bye.
All
right. So we'll go with you, Jacob.
Okay. My name's Jake. I go by Kodabuki Jake. Here, I am also a big-time collector and viewer of various TV shows, movies, music, you name it, and frequently guest on the YouTube channel Septum Sin versus the World, and also have my own occasionally used YouTube channel, Kodabuki Jake, that's devoted to more nature and the natural world. We just finished on Septum Sin. I'm sure you can go into some more detail if you want to, but we just did a pretty fun little weird video that we'll have coming out later this week. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. And yeah, I'll hand it to you then.
Well, before I hand this back to Dave, I'll go ahead and do my bow out, which is I am Septum Sen of Septum Sen versus the World. We are a YouTube channel that specifies, that focuses on physical media, be that music, movies, or other things. Movies being the main topic of our show. We do videos that talk about what movies and films are coming out on DVD and Blu-ray. Matter of fact, I ran into somebody just today who was like, I didn't know that people still watched Blu-ray and DVD. And I'm like, oh boy. But that's what we're here to do, is keep spreading the word and showing the importance of physical media in our society today. Society is streaming. It's always good to have those things backed up on physical media. Of course, for this Friday, we did have a recent review that I encourage you to check out of Out and About the Movie 2 by Wet Movie 1, another large media YouTuber. And I also have, we also have this top, well, it's not really a top 10, but we have a video of 20 oddities in our collection of strange and mysterious items. Of course, I also work some for Inside Movies Galore, doing the occasional review and compilation, which of course brings us to our next month, which will be, of course, the October season, which brings us lots of Halloween and horror-related films. We are setting up voting in various places, so if you are somebody who runs in those circles, cast a vote. Who knows? Maybe your vote will be for the movie mentioned and actually utilized in our reviews for the next month. All right, I hand it back to you, Dave.
Alrighty, thank you for hosting tonight, and looking forward to next month with all that spooky stuff. So, hopefully, we'll get scared again somehow by celebrating the Hollywood cheer. So, my name is David Straggy. I run Inside Music Galore with the rest of you, folks, and hopefully you've enjoyed our journey so far. I do reviews of my own, and lately I've been doing some video collection video collections, videos and reviews, and I just got a new HD camera that you can clearly see me better in, and so I will be excited to share my video collection with you even more and get more reviews out once I can get going here with some of my cool things that I have to share with you, and hopefully have some more fun and exciting interviews eventually once I can get back into the roll of things. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, and morning, and boy.
Oh, let's of course not forget next week's film, which is going to end our supernatural summer.
Ooh.
And that is going, or September, I should say. And that is going to be the Dark Castle remake of the Castle film, 13 Ghosts.
Ooh.
I hope you all will be there with us as we discuss this remake of a horror classic.
I wonder whose uncle died to leave us that house. Anyways.
You got to wear special glasses for this one.